he was like, I don't understand why you're so expensive. And I said, well, I believe we're worth it. And he said, well, what do you do that's so, that makes you so worth it? And I said, well, Chelsea's about to show you. And after that visit, if you don't believe that, you're free to go somewhere else. Like literally, that was the conversation.
100%.
Welcome to the Dr. J.J. Thomas Podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Dr. J.J. Thomas Podcast. I'm J.J. Thomas. I am here today with one of my friends and rockstar clinicians / educators, Kyle Kimbrell.
Hi.
Welcome, Kyle.
Hi.
I will do a brief introduction into Kyle, and then I want to get into a lot of the nitty gritty of why he's on and some of the cool stuff he does. So Kyle, I met him through my first BFR, blood flow restriction training exposure years before COVID. And
there was a time before
BFR
COVID?
has been,
Gosh.
It was a time before COVID. Yes. And I was impressed with BFR right away, but it grew and grew since then. So, and Kyle's always been a great resource. So it's been great, having you as a resource, Kyle. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Kyle was one of the first, took the first courses with Johnny Owens and before when Owens Recovery Science was in its infancy. Yes.
Yeah. When Johnny was just a one-man show. Yeah. Crazy enough.
So one man, and then he. Tell us about that story. Tell me how that came to be.
It's kind of funny. So I kind of Twitter stalked Johnny, honestly.
You did?
I did a little bit. I didn't know who he was, so I had no real reason to Twitter stalk him. But I saw that he was going to be on this ESPN special that Stefania Bell and Hannah Storm were doing down Center for the Intrepid on Veterans Day. And this was must have been 2014. Yeah, had to have been. So I followed him on Twitter because they had tagged him. And I just randomly, I think I was one of his first 10 followers. And I sent him a message.
Awesome.
And he responded back. And I had just some questions. And I can't remember if he had mentioned on the show with Stefania and Hannah that they were going to be teaching classes, but somehow the topic of there actually being classes to learn BFR had come about. And I knew what BFR was just from picking up an article about 10 years prior, funny enough. It was in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning, and they called it occlusion training, and it didn't tell you anything about how they did BFR at all. No mention whatsoever of the device, of the pressure that they used, any of that stuff. It was literally just, use the lightweight 20 to 30% load. And when I read that, I thought, wow, if that's a thing, that actually really reshapes rehab as we know it. Because as you know, getting people to lift heavy is hard for a lot of different reasons in rehab,
Yeah.
And so I thought, man, I really want to learn that if it's a thing. And it just so happened that that's what he was doing on that show. And from there, I kept asking him, when is this thing happening, And in my mind, I'm like, dude, let's go. Just get off the pot,
Yeah, let's just show up. I got my pen and paper. And I'm ready to go.
And meanwhile, he's trying to build content and figuring out, do I leave this amazing job in the DoD where, making fantastic money, incredible job security, lots of influence. Do I just leave that and sell my house to fund this business? And that's what he's going through. And me, I'm like,
right. And there's you.
What's the date? So finally,
how many CEUs am I going to get?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Oh God.
Exactly. Right.
So anyway, he finally kind of gets everything sort of organized and starting to think about having the classes. And he's like, dude, you just want to host? And I went, oh, I never even thought about that. And so then I had to convince my boss to bring this guy in to strap tourniquets on our arms and legs and exercise. And my boss trusts me a lot, but that conversation did not go well initially
I can only imagine.
There were some choice words, and some very absolute terms used. And I said, I understand, but just listen to this podcast. And it just so happened to be a podcast that I had posed some questions to Johnny for. And he knew me from Twitter and the host knew me from Twitter. So they started making fun of my mustache because I had like this big Lorax looking mustache with the beard at the time. And
that's great.
And so they make fun of me on the podcast, and like that was the thing that got my boss to decide, oh, this guy must be all right. He's making fun of Kyle. Let's bring him in to do some Con Ed, you know?
Oh my God. Well, because I get it though. I'm with him. But I respect that because you know what it showed? It showed that he's a straight shooter. Like it showed that they were like, this is the God's honest truth. Your mustache is a little funny.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I just had to wear it all, you know?
You did. You wear it. Listen, you can wear it all.
Yeah.
That is the God's honest truth too. That's cool.
Yeah. But that's
oh
really,
my God.
That's kind of how it happened. And so then, you know, from there, Johnny came out. He taught us what to do, and I just got super interested in the technique, you know, just trying to learn more about it. And then he just was incrementally needing help because it was just snowballing big time.
Blowing up.
Yeah. So I just started doing all the West Coast stuff. What's that?
The first podcast you mentioned, was it Johnny or was it?
No, that was
it was somebody else?
With Urson Religioso and Gene Shirakabrad. And I think they had another guy. It was the Therapy Insiders podcast. This was it was like 2015, probably like early awesome. 2015, somewhere in there. Yeah.
So for the people that don't, because I know a lot of these stories like just from over the years, and I love them all. They'll never get old for me. But I think the one that is really important for people to hear is like how the Center for the Intrepid kind of came upon the progression of BFR.
Yeah, sure.
And do you mind sharing that?
Not at all. And I would say that sometimes I get kind of lumped into being a part of this. I had no part in this part of the story whatsoever. It's just
except that it wouldn't have grown if you weren't stalking him on Twitter.
That's my piece, you know.
You're welcome, Johnny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. On second thought, it's all me.
It's all you.
Oh.
Everybody needs a wingman.
Yeah, you gotta have a wingman or a wing woman. It doesn't matter, you know.
Or a wing woman. I can be a wingman. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, so Johnny Owens, our founder and kind of the straw that has stirred the drink in some ways in the rehab world with BFR, he was working at Brooke Army Medical Center down in San Antonio, and he had gotten hired on to really take like a sports performance type job. But at the same time, we were in these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so shortly after hiring on, they were like, yeah, so about that, you know, we kind of got a lot of stuff we're dealing with here in terms of trauma from war. And so he very quickly transitioned into what he has just described as like a limb salvage role. So the chief orthotrauma surgeon, Dr. Joe Hsu, who he was featured on the Alex Smith stuff some, I think, and some other kind of high profile cases recently. He had come in and he approached Johnny and he said, look, you know, our people that have amputations, our people that have had limb salvage procedures, they really need kind of this sports loading approach to rehab as well, because those tissues also respond to load, bone, tendon, etc. And you know, the stuff on the table is great to a degree, but I really want you to help me kind of, you know, look at better ways to rehab these folks. So that was kind of the start of it. And then from there, the problem that they started having was guys and girls that got their lower legs blown up were going on to like later stage amputations after having all these procedures to save the limb, and going through all that. And so the first thing that they did was they devised an orthosis that helped those service members load that limb and ultimately be able to run. Like, that was really the main purpose of this orthosis, was not only, to help them walk, but in order to go back to service, you have to pass these running tests. And you could do that if you had a prosthetic and your leg had been amputated. But if you had a limb salvage procedure and you had a difficult time developing some loading tolerance and ability to run, that was an issue. So the device was very successful in that regard. What they developed, it was totally unique, totally custom made by their prosthetists and orthotists there in Brooke Army Medical. And at this point, they've had this big facility built called Center for the Intrepid, where all of them have offices. It's just this incredible space where collaboration happens and a lot of innovation happens and that sort of thing. So kind of following the limb salvage and the development of the IDEO brace, they also started noticing a problem that about 25% of those people that had gotten the brace could never really get strong enough in their quad to be able to use the brace and to run with it. And that's problematic because that device is very stiff and it has to be very stiff. But the stiffness of it allows it to kind of store and release energy, much like a tendon does when you walk or when you run. I think one of the things that we forget about sometimes is, like, even when we ambulate, like, it's very efficient because of just the stiffness and the elasticity of our tendons. Like, there's not actually a whole lot of metabolic cost to walking because of that. And so, and a similar thing is true for running. Of course, there's a lot more energy expenditure with running, but you're still storing and releasing energy, and these tendons have to do that. And so the device had to be very rigid to do that. In so doing, your quad had to be strong because it has to kick in a bit there. Not necessarily more than just a normal limb that's uninjured, but it had to be sufficient. And if the quad wasn't insufficient, you could really harm someone's knee and have a not good kind of event just trying to run with that device. So they're searching for ways to use lightweights to get bigger and stronger because they were having a really difficult time loading those limbs due to pain. The limbs were painful. That's why they needed a device. In some cases, they could load up the quad, in others they couldn't. And so they started searching for, solutions, and kind of happened upon BFR. In so doing, they have a lot of exercise physiologists there near Center for the Intrepid at the Institute for Surgical Research. And so, they get those guys in a room, they get Johnny and the ortho people in a room, they have tourniquet experts down there. They got a lot of really smart people down there to start looking at this BFR thing and trying to figure out, is this really a thing? Like, none of us have heard of it. Yeah. Why? That kind of deal. And so
that must have been cool to be in that room, like part of
right?
that. Yeah. So cool.
And I also think of that in the context of how people make a decision to use BFR now versus.
Oh, I know. Well, that's why. Exactly. That's why and we'll talk about this later, but like, not just to use BFR, but like to use occlusion, as you talk about, like in general, like people are just like slapping crap on. Man. Like, oh God.
I know, we're asking for trouble sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway, they have this big round table and, a lot of smart people, and finally they decide to trial it. And they met with BFR researchers from around the U.S. The main one that they really got to know is Jeremy Lineker, who's at the University of Mississippi, and is probably one of the most prolific BFR researchers in the world. I want to say he's got over 100 BFR publications, but that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but not much. Anywho, they start messing around with this BFR thing, and it really was working well for those service members that needed to get stronger. And so they had a small cohort of people that they trialed it on. They all did extremely well in terms of regaining their ability to produce force out of their quad, and thus being able to use that IDEO device. So from there, they kind of rolled it out into using it more and more in rehab, and it just kind of snowballed from there to the point where a device was developed off of the stuff that they were using at Center for the Intrepid. A whole new device was developed out of that. So, and then here we are.
That's so cool. And here we are. And that's, like I said, I think I first trained in it in, I'm going to say, I think it was like 2017, 2018 maybe. Yeah. And then I didn't actually buy my first unit though. Then it's funny. I didn't buy the unit right away, and we were talking about this a little bit before, and I didn't actually use BFR at that point yet because I was insistent that when I started using it, I was going to use the unit that they developed. Yeah. Because I just felt like it's a reflection of things being done right. It's a reflection of, I'm a firm believer that like you need to be able to stand by your product, and I just felt like the other options out there I wasn't able to rely on in terms of knowing that I was giving them what I thought I was giving them. So I finally like circled back and fulfilled my wish list a few years later, and I actually think I did buy it in COVID, and then went from there. Okay. So anyway, but what I wanted to actually mention was the evolution. So through that time, I always followed BFR and the progression of the applications now. And the evidence behind different applications is actually incredible to me. Yeah. So I would love to talk a little bit about that. Like from my perspective, when I was first starting to explain BFR to patients, it was primarily for the hypertrophy benefits, for the tapping into type 2 muscle fibers when you can't load a tissue enough. And then through COVID, I started listening to a lot of your podcasts. And they're one of the only podcasts I'll listen to that's longer than 30 minutes, quite honestly. But I was saying, because they're so good, like there's so much content in there that is research-based and applicable that I just can't, it's worth it to me, the time investment. But, and then I started opening my eyes to, like, I listened to the long COVID application, the PACER project, application for tendons and bones and ACLR. And I mean, the list goes on and on. So what's your perspective on that? What's your perspective on the growth of the applications? And honestly, it's a free, whatever you want to say there.
I appreciate that. And I echo that. I think that, I was just a guest on another podcast, last week, and the guy asked me what really, what I'm excited for with BFR. And I said, well, I'm really excited to see it moving more and more clinical, like seeing it being used in neurologic populations. Like I just reviewed a paper the other day on BFR use in multiple sclerosis, people with pretty advanced multiple sclerosis. So we're seeing trials, getting put together for people. So we're seeing this exercise solution that really is for hypertrophy and strength. And we're seeing it getting looked at by other groups that are saying, look, well, we've got exercise problems too, and could this be a solution for us? And how do we navigate that? I've the one of the fun things about doing what I do now, and also kind of being active on social media, honestly, is I've just met people from all different arenas of PT and rehab and physiology. Awesome. And so I get to have a lot of fun, interesting conversations. And, I got a buddy that works a lot with chronic fatigue, or I can never say it, but it's myalgic encephalopathy or something like that.
You said it. I think you said it.
I never think I've gotten it right. It always gets abbreviated MECFS. And now we're seeing that also be like long COVID-ish, and people kind of going into that. And so, we've had these conversations where it's just like, exercise doesn't work for these people. A lot of times you can't exercise them. Like the littlest thing can really get their heart rate up, but it still seems like they need some sort of everything needs a stimulus to change, right? This doesn't matter what it is, whether it's our intelligence or our physique or whatever, there has to be the right stimulus. And so, I can't help but wonder can we just manipulate their blood flow a little bit that kind of mimics exercise.
Yeah.
Is it just a matter of finding the right load, if you will, and figuring out how to dose it. So, we've had conversations about that, and he's played around with it a little bit. So that stuff really gets me energized and excited and wanting to learn more and work more with people. But I also, I get concerned when people just, I don't want people to forget about the hypertrophy and the strength, because I the skeletal muscles so important for our health in general. We have a paper that we use in the class now, which I don't know if it's new since you've taken it or not, but I think it was year 2002. The U.S. spent something like $200 billion managing just the limited amount of muscle mass that people have because of the complications that it leads to with surgery and mortality and all of that. And so I just think that as PTs or just anybody in the rehab world that works with people, the better we understand skeletal muscle, the better we understand just like what our patients are going through and what's happening because of just their reduction in activity and those sorts of things. I think we're just get that much better at prescribing exercise if we better understand that, It means 100%. We do it earlier, but it means we also have recognized that.
Yeah. A couple things follow up to the things you said. One, yes, on the front end, like we actually had a patient recently. I find myself utilizing it for more and more things because of the podcast and because of the research that you guys put out there. And like, I'm not concussion vestibular specialized, but one of my therapists is, and she had a long COVID. One of my, actually a family friend, is an athlete, long COVID symptoms, concussion type, I say concussion, but vestibular,
right.
Fatigability, those kinds of brain fatigue, brain fog. And she just started using BFR with her and she's seeing good results. So it's really cool. Like that's the cool side of the new applications and seeing it actually, seeing it work clinically. But on the flip side, first of all, I can't imagine if anybody uses it and uses it well and correctly, that they could forget about the musculoskeletal piece, because it's BFR was the one tool outside of needling that I felt like I could show my patients immediately that we could help them.
Yeah.
Like for me, most people feel a difference right away, and you just can't deny that. So as a therapist, when your patients are seeing that, and they're, a lot of them are skeptics because they've been through other things, and and they're like, just like you said, explaining it to your boss, like you're strapping this cuff on, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
But the minute they feel you take that cuff off and then they walk down the stairs and they're feeling better, they're like, whoa, all right, what do you have tomorrow?
Right. Right.
So that's cool. But another question that brings me to is like, I've had some same social media conversations with colleagues, other PTs who are using BFR, but haven't necessarily taken Owen's recovery science courses. And of course, I am a big proponent of the way you guys do things. And I think it's important. But what advice can you give therapists that are looking to learn BFR in terms of what they need to know in order to be trained well?
Yeah. I mean, personally, I think you need to take an in-person course and that exposes you to using BFR. You can do that in an Owen's recovery science course for sure. There are other courses also. I just don't think that you can. I can't imagine personally doing this, like taking an online class and then deciding to try this on a patient, like not having done it myself. I just personally would not do that. I'm not saying you can't, but I just think that it makes it that much more difficult to have the conversations that you have to have when you're working with a patient. And it I guess it just kind of makes me wonder how good you are at having those a little bit. If that's all you've done is like done an online thing,
and I'm putting myself in the shoes that you're talking about. Like I know, like having the I actually took your course twice.
Yeah.
Because I took the one, then I didn't buy the unit because I was having a hard time spot. So then I took it again because I was like, shit, do I remember what to do? I better so I took it again. So that 100%. Was actually really cool. I might have taken it 3 times, honestly. I'm hilarious. But anyway, but the point was that just having that confidence of like being able to navigate, as you said, like you do one set of exercises with a patient when your goal is hypertrophy, and then depending on how they tolerate it or how they respond, that decision-making tree of like, do I do a second set now? Do I, because actually what prompted this was I was messaging with a colleague and who's like in a different state, and we were talking about BFR, and he was like, I told him how we usually do 3-4, like we work up to 3-4 sets of like for rotator cuffs, say. And he's like, whoa, we do like 1. And I was like, well, dude, you probably need to be doing more. But, you have to make sure that you're able to navigate, as you said, the patient's comfort and their response and all those things. So
for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. But I was surprised to hear that's what prompted the question exactly. Because I thought, I guess that's true. I guess if you haven't trained with people who are saying like, these are the protocols we use and this is what seems to work for us, then it's a little bit of a toss-up.
That's one of the things I really like about exercise. Like I think our profession, everybody thinks their profession is tough. Like that's just the way it goes. But like ours is, I mean, everybody, like accountants, it doesn't matter what you do. Like you think your profession is, like, and I'm not saying it's not hard. Yeah, you're right. But just also get over yourself. Come on.
Yeah, it's true.
But the difficulties we have in our profession is that it's really hard to say, well, how many visits are you going to need? And what's the response going to be to this intervention or that intervention? Kind of like you mentioned with dry needling or BFR. Like how many times, for example, and I tell this to students so one of the fun things that I get to do is I get to talk to a lot of PT schools now. And I love talking to students because they're like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I like to kind of just smash that down a little bit. not really, but I do like to kind of just ask questions and challenge a little, right? And so I'll never forget, like being a PT student, but I still think about this. And every clinic I went into, I wondered, is anybody ever going to tell me, like, how long do you have to range of motion a knee before it gets to range? Like, I mean, the most basic freaking thing we do, JJ. Like every clinic, like somebody's in a clinic doing this right now while we're talking.
That's so funny.
And they haven't even thought about the fact, like, how long do you have to do this? How many visits a week do you have? And so I, the one thing I like about all that, I'm leading up to a point, I promise.
I don't care. I'm having fun.
With exercise, we actually kind of have some answers, Like, I mean, and credit to Zach, who couldn't get on today because he was, I don't know, his Google was messed up or something. But one of the things he has made a point of bringing up a number of times, and we've just kind of integrated into our teaching, is this idea of if you want to add muscle, you really need about 10 sets per week of activity, exercise in that muscle to get that muscle to grow. And we kind of infer strength with that. It's not necessarily accurate, but we can kind of infer a little bit of increase in strength when you get hypertrophy. And so if you think about like BFR, for example, we have these 4 sets, 30, 15, 15, 15. So we just kind of call those 4 sets. It's not, some might kind of shrink it and say, oh, it's just 1 set because it's just 1 inflation. We think about the inflation as the set. But it's actually probably more like 30, 15, 15, 15, 4 sets. And 2 of those sets, if you really have like the pressure good and the load good, 2 of those sets are terrible. Like they're hard, you know?
It's true.
Right? So you get 2 sets that are in a whole bunch of fatigue, which, fatigue is key for getting muscle to change. So if you pull back from that and you go, all right, let me just look at this chart. Like I know I get the load right. I know I get the pressure right. I need this person's quad to get bigger and stronger. You can just do math on it. You can go, okay, well, the only quad exercise they did was this one BFR of long arc quad. So if I take that 10 sets and I go, well, I got 4, or this person's coming in Monday and Thursday. I only got 4 sets on Monday and I only got 4 sets on Thursday. You get it on the camera. Now I know just from the math that this person might not have done enough to gain muscle, right? And so I can just use that as a way to kind of go check that box. When that person leaves, now I at least know, hey, we were going to have to add another exercise next time they come in, right? Or they did enough. And that feels good as a therapist to just kind of check that box and go, we earned some muscle today. We did some real good for that person.
Yeah.
They just got to repeat it,
That's
right?
right.
You know, but they at least did it, because it's so hard to really have that sense of satisfaction. Like, that's why I love mowing the grass. Because when it's done, it looks great.
You get
right?
to see it.
It looks amazing.
I know.
Like, I want a lawn business just because of that. You know, to like counterbalance the uncertainty in my life.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
But then you'll just like you said, every profession thinks their job's hard. So then you'll be in the lawn business. You'll be like, man, I really wish I could go into PT and teach people some BFR.
Telling you. But,
Oh, that's funny. So talking about the load stuff, what was I going to say? Gosh, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Thinking about the lawn. Oh, I know what I was going to say.
You're thinking about nice, clean cut grass.
I was. But when you talked about, I mean, for those listening who haven't tried BFR, I will say it's tough when you do it right. But also, so I tore my ACL, remember, a little over a year ago.
Right.
And I will say, like, BFR post-op was a whole nother mental game for me. Then, oh man, I went to a dark place. I would go in the corner of the clinic. I was like, JJ is not home. You people don't talk to me. Don't look in my direction. In fact, don't even walk where I can hear you, because I really need to dig here. It was not pretty.
Stop breathing. Do not come near me and breathe.
I am not kidding. I would literally face the corner, because if I saw people, I would get like annoyed at them that they walked in my field of view.
That's so funny. That's really funny.
I know, but it worked. I mean, it's worth it. It's like, it's worth it.
Yeah.
So, it's been a huge game changer. Thank you for continuing to train everybody in it. And do you have any idea of how many therapists have trained through Owen's Recovery Science? That's a random question to ask you, on the fire.
We have certified around 15,000 people now. It's not
really cool.
All PTs. You know, it's athletic trainers, PTs, PTAs, OTs, chiros, strength and conditioning are lumped in there, I think. But yeah, we've trained a lot of people.
Yeah, I know a lot of the teams have them in bulk. I mean, have many units for like recovery, and it's awesome.
Yeah, the your Eagles, who
they do.
Didn't have such a good weekend.
No, it's not the year to
might mention them with caution now, but last year they put out on social media their offensive line or defensive line or somebody was like doing a little BFR exercise after a game, doing a BFR recovery exercise, if you will.
Well, and I think they had a bunch of them on the bike.
A bunch of them on bikes,
They at least, Yeah, well, I don't think the BFR was the problem this year for them.
Yeah. They started off so good. Like, they looked like...
I thought so.
I mean...
I refuse to be a hater. I'm supporting my boys.
Yeah,
I'll be there for you when you're down. It's all right. We're human. You're human. Everybody's human.
Well, I don't think...
We got another year.
I don't think there's any other town that has the energy for fandom like Philly, you know?
Oh, that's... I don't know if I should take that as a compliment.
No, you should. I love it. You are, and it is vulgar at times. It is unreasonable. And I'm here for all of it. I find it so entertaining.
Well, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, I will say, I'm a fan. I can be vulgar, but not at my boys. I'm very loyal to my boys. So,
I love that energy. I think it's fun.
I mean, that's about most of my questions. I'm trying to think if there was anything. Is there anything else? Oh, I know. We were just talking about the cuff, and the one last thing I did want to get out of you, if you don't mind, and I know it's probably a delicate thing, but the question I get a lot, or not even question, but therapists will tell me, oh, we don't have the Cadillac unit like you have, like, and so the differences in the units and the cuffs and just your take on that. And to me, it's important. I already said that early on in the show, that to me, the quality that you get with the DELFA units and the intention behind the size of the cuffs and the real-time Doppler measurements and all the safety features to me are really important, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, it's layered for sure. I think, as we were talking kind of off air, the big barrier for people buying the DELFA unit that we sell is cost, because it's an expensive device. It's, $5,000 for the basic unit. And honestly, like, that shuts the conversation down right there immediately a lot of times. And I understand that. I think to a degree, I do. I especially understand it in the PT marketplace and where it is now in terms of payment and all of that, because it's at least, if you're straight up insurance based, it just kind of keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So I get it. At the same time, I think that just looking at, and this is what I said to you, I said, I think if you're just looking at upfront costs, that's not really a full cost analysis. You have to kind of consider, is there any risk to you as a business owner, as a clinician, if you're using a device that does not meet standards that we have for tourniquets and devices that are already out there that have been well established and go back decades. So I think that's potentially problematic. And one of the things that I actually have wanted to do for Owens, and I've just never done it, is to hire a malpractice attorney and just actually get them to work something up.
That's awesome.
Do you think there's risk? What do you think in terms of how would you approach this if there was harm done? What would...
I'm going to ask, I might be able to help you with that. I happen to know the guys that did the dry needling research for potential injury risk when dry needling was first coming out, and there were some. So maybe I can reach out to them and see if, because the insurance company actually offered to do it.
Interesting.
So they had people on staff that,
Interesting.
So I'll check into that. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah,
and I
awesome.
hadn't thought of that when I asked you off air, but I think that's right. In retrospect, I think that's why I didn't buy any unit. When I originally didn't feel like I had the funds that I could put into it right away, I looked at the other units and I was like, I'm not going to do that. I don't know if it's safe. I don't even know if I'm going to get the results I want. To me, it was all about the results. And I'm like, if I don't get the right unit, then I don't even know if I'm going to give them the results. So,
right.
But I didn't even think of the risk factor. So that's huge.
Yeah. And the counter argument to all that is people will say, well, people have used knee wraps and lots of other devices that don't do the things like DELFA does in research and have gotten results and that sort of thing. And that is true. It's accurate. However, the vast majority of those are not being applied in a clinical scenario, number one, which is brings up a big kind of important piece there. Because you can do BFR in a lot of ways. There's no denying that. We can't argue against that. I would never argue against that. But what I do to myself is a little bit different than what I do to a patient. Right. Mm-hmm. So we have added layers of just rigor in terms of our thought and our execution of things. So I think you have to kind of take that into consideration and just think it's the same. I don't really follow that line of thinking. So I think you gotta kind go a different direction. There are things that we know about restricting blood flow. Like, for example, we know that we need kind of like a wider cuff to fully occlude blood flow. And there are a number of devices on the market that do not meet that. They're not wide enough, which ultimately means in the leg, they can't create full occlusion. That's been shown in a few different research papers. In fact, the title was, looking for a more affordable kind of solution, essentially kind of saying like, well, the Hokinson device, which you see used a lot in BFR research, is not really attainable. And then of course the DELFA is expensive, and we restrict who can buy it, for reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, just knowing that the device actually has the capacity to do what you need it to do is another piece, that I see getting missed a ton.
Exactly.
And not considered a ton. And we're actually seeing, even in the literature, studies coming out where people have misapplied things like an algorithm that Jeremy Linecky came up with to help determine limb occlusion pressure. Jeremy, showed that it was pretty accurate with the devices that he was using. But then what people have done is they've taken it and they've applied it, like with, for example, and not to bash any company, but there's been a number of studies that have used that algorithm with the B-Strong device. And the B-Strong device, if you're unfamiliar, it's not as wide as the DELFA. I think they do have a couple different widths. I'm not exactly sure about that. But the main thing, their main selling point, if you will, is that they're a multi-chamber device, which means they can never occlude. No matter how high you pump it up, they can never occlude. Well, if you can't occlude, then that means you don't have a way to determine limb occlusion pressure. And so what some researchers have done is they've just taken the width of that multi-chamber device and they've applied Jeremy's algorithm to it. But they've ignored the fact that the manufacturer actually says you can never occlude with this device, and they have videos on their website demonstrating that. So
oh my gosh.
I just think it's important that whatever device you use, you have an understanding of what that device can and cannot do, and you're able to support it. And that's where things fall down a little bit for some of the other devices, is they just haven't really been developed in ways that comprehensively kind of evaluate their capabilities. I think the one device that was in that affordable study was getting sold, and telling people that they're getting this pressure, and they weren't getting that pressure. And we figured it out just from an Instagram video, because strangely enough, there's this prominent PT that's using the device, and he's got like a cross-country runner leaning against the table, and it said his limb occlusion pressure was 270. And I went, there ain't no way that dude's limb occlusion pressure is 270 on a DELFA. I know that for sure. Well, come to find out, that device maxes out at 270. So what it would do is, if it maxed out, it just gives you that number instead of telling you you can't determine a pressure. Well, that's kind of dishonest.
That's
in
different
my opinion,
information.
It's kind of dishonest.
Exactly.
I mean, it just shows me that you haven't done your due diligence. Not the clinician. I'm just saying the device company. You didn't do your due diligence. So
yeah, but honestly,
clinician
said this to you off air. I know I was telling Kyle. I'm just going to share with the listeners. I was saying how I use the Delphi and the Owens Recovery Science training sometimes as a measure of a therapist's standards, because I get patients all the time who want recommendations for PTs anywhere around the country. And if I don't know someone in that specific area, what I'll do is I'll search Owens Recovery Science. I'll look for somebody that has been trained for them. And then I know that they have high standards because they don't mind essentially paying for the best unit.
Resources.
I mean, that's literally,
Right.
I mean, to me, it says a lot. I'm not saying that if you don't have a Delphi, you're a bad therapist, but I'm saying if you do have a Delphi, I know that you are a good therapist.
Yeah.
That's
right.
There you go, PTs.
There you go. So shit. I mean,
it's
fair.
I know
I think it's
it's funny.
fair.
I mean, You think I swear I'm not getting a kickback, people. Like, this is just the way my brain works. Like,
I'm always fascinated, and since we're kind of talking money a little bit here, and I know your podcast kind of talks about everything. So, like, I do not ask for discounts. I'm like, if your service costs whatever, I'm happy to pay for your service because it means I can't do it myself. Like my barber, I'd literally like double that dude up,
I know.
Like
it's insurance,
right? Like I want
do that
him
with babysitters.
happy. I want him knowing I appreciate his service. And he's only got half of a face to deal with too.
I know, and you double them anyway.
And it's the
but
bottom
that's
half,
also
not the top.
It's
It's
also because you want, if you need him, you want him available. It's like insurance, right? I think. I mean, I don't know about you, but I do that with hairstylists and babysitters. Yeah, they get paid very well because I want them to want it.
100%.
Yeah. That's so funny.
And I don't want to feel like I should be discounting my service. Like
100%.
You're getting every damn thing I can give you when you come take a course with me.
That's right.
And you're getting all of it. I'm crushed after these courses, I'm just like exhausted. And by the way, you're getting it all week, every week, because you've got my phone number now. You got my email. You can reach out to me anytime.
You can stalk them on Twitter. You can stalk me on
Twitter, like it is open access, And,
that's right.
And you've paid for that in my mind, and and you deserve that from me, and you have it if you want it. But that's kind of the approach I'm taking.
With you
so
on
I
that.
expect, do unto others is really kind of what it comes down to at some point. The golden rule: do unto others. This is how I want to be treated. So this is how I'm going to treat people.
I'm with you, and I don't want to treat people that don't like. Right, if somebody's asking for a discount on the reverse side. Like I had a guy recently, he was working with one of my PTs and I overheard him like haggling her about how expensive he said we were. And I was like, can I help?
Nice.
And later she was like, thanks for taking that. But he was like, I don't understand why you're so expensive. And I said, well, I believe we're worth it. And he said, well, what do you do that's so, that makes you so worth it? And I said, well, Chelsea's about to show you. And after that visit, if you don't believe that, you're free to go somewhere else. Like literally that was the conversation.
100%. Right.
Yeah.
We'll deliver. We'll deliver.
Yeah.
And if you don't, well,
so,
okay, don't spend the money again.
Kyle, this has been awesome. I am sorry Zach couldn't make it. Zach, we will have you back.
I feel like we gave him plenty of content though to come back at us.
I know. You can come back and talk about Kyle's beard and whatever else. But Zach is a brain, and listening to him, I actually would take the course with Zach over and over again because there's so much research content he gives that I learn more every time. So we will have you back, Zach. And for everyone else, check out Owen's Recovery Science if you're not already following them on their podcast, on their website. Look for Con Ed courses. They're just awesome humans to follow and listen to and be friendly with anyway. Kyle, is there anything else that they should check out regarding Owen's Recovery Science?
No, I mean, our website is owensrecoveryscience.com. The podcast is Owen's Recovery Science. Just Google that and you'll find it all. And then just, follow along as we continue to navigate this BFR thing. You never know where it's going to go. So we're working in outer space now, Kyle. So you never know.
You're
working
right.
on NASA and all that now, so...
Are you? Yeah. Oh my gosh!
Well, one of the coolest conferences I've been to, JJ, it was one that the folks they're called ACERs, which is basically like an acronym for an acronym. Is that right? That's probably right.
Yeah. Acronym. I think so.
For just people that help recondition the astronauts after they come back from the International Space Station. So. We're working with them on some stuff, and
that's
they have
so
a
cool
like rehab conference that they're doing. So
yeah, this is what I'm saying. I mean, this is like, you guys are the people I have on the podcast, in case the listeners haven't figured out, are people that I want to surround myself because they're always looking to be better. Like that's why people like you guys are on here, because I want to be around you, because the bar is always moving.
Well, we want to be around you too, JJ. We enjoy you as well. So this is a mutual. It's mutual.
I appreciate
Absolutely.
that. All right. Well, you go have a great night, Kyle. Thank you to all the listeners. And and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye.